यस,
सर ये लग नहीं रहा है।
मैं भेजता हूँ लिंक। Today, in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, मलनाडु टीवी इंडिया, न्यूज गांव से, संवाद सारोकार न्यूज, भारत पोस्ट न्यूज, कारो न्यूज, organ donation India Foundation and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic, and today's topic is not only current, very, very hot, burning, and the topic is freedom of speech. The restoration of free speech, free association, and free press is almost the whole Swaraj, said Mahatma Gandhi. If the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter, said George Washington. Freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. The right to freedom of expression has been recognized as a human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Human Rights Law by the United Nations. A lot of countries have constitutional law that protects free speech. Terms like free speech, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression are used interchangeably in political discourse. However, in legal sense, the freedom of expression includes any activity of seeking, receiving, and imparting information or ideas regardless of the medium used. The Constitution of India provides the right of freedom given in Article 19 with the view of guaranteeing individual rights that were considered vital by the framers of the Constitution. The right to freedom in Article 19 guarantees the freedom of speech and expression as one of its 6 freedoms. The Constituent Assembly of India debated on freedom of speech and expression, Article 19A1 of the draft Constitution 1948 on 1st December 1948, 2nd December 1948, and 17th October 1949. The draft article read, I quote, subject to other provisions of the article, all citizens shall have the right A, to freedom of speech and expression. Proviso, nothing in subclause A of clause 1 of this article shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law relating to libel, slander, defamation, sedition, or any other matter which offends against decency or morality or undermines the security of or tends to overthrow the state. Unquote. Most members of the Constituent Assembly welcomed the inclusion of the right. However, conflict emerged around the provisions in the article that placed restrictions on the right. While some members opposed the mention of restrictions on the right, others supported it. Members who opposed the restrictions argued that there is no point in having a right to freedom of speech and expression in the presence of restrictions. Putting restrictions on the freedom of speech and expression was a British practice. Members who supported the restrictions argued that the restrictions were fine as the government was no longer a colonial one. The right to free speech was not absolute anywhere in the world. The law, order, and security of the state could not be compromised. At the end, the Constituent Assembly voted on the article and included a right to freedom of speech and expression in the Constitution of India 1950 with restrictions similar to the ones mentioned in the draft Constitution 1948. The Indian Constitutions, while not mentioning the word press, provides for the right to freedom of speech and expression, Article 19, subclause 1A. However, this right is subject to restrictions under subclause whereby this freedom can be restricted for reasons of sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, preserving decency, preserving morality, resisting to contempt, court defamation, or incitement to an offense. Laws such as the Official Secrets Act and Prevention of Terrorist Activities Act 23, POTA, have been used to limit press freedom. Under POTA, person could be detained for up to 6 months for being in contact with a terrorist or terrorist group. POTA was replaced in 2006, but the Official Secrets Act 1923 continues. According to the English law, sedation embraces all the practices, whether by word or writing, which are calculated to disturb the tranquility of the state and lead an ignorant person to subvert the government. Basic criticism of the government is not seen as sedation unless the government believes that it was calculated to undermine the respect for the government in such a way so as to make people cease to obey it. Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code defines the offense of sedation as follows. Sedation, whoever by, I am just quoting the 124A, sedation, whoever by word, either spoken or written, or by sign, or by visible representation, or otherwise brings or attempts to bring into hatred or contempt or excites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government established by law in India, shall be punished with imprisonment for life, to which fine may be added, or with imprisonment which may extend to 3 years, to which fine may be added, or with fine. But explanation 3 says, comments expressing disapprobation of the administrative or other action of the government without exciting or attempting to excite hatred, contempt, or disaffection do not constitute an offense under this section. In Kedarnath versus State of Bihar, AIR 1962, Supreme Court 955, the court upheld the constitutional validity of Section 124A of IPC and also upheld the view taken in Niraudun's case. Now, why this topic of freedom of speech today? There are two things have happened recently. One was the statement of Miss Kangana Raut, so-called Bollywood actress, and the other is one Mr. Veer Das, so-called a standing comedian. Why I'm using the word so-called? Because a Bollywood actress is supposed to work as a Bollywood actress, and a standing comedian is supposed to give the comedy or satire, but whether they are allowed to cross their limits to say something about the government, about the country, about the nation as a whole, or the freedom fighters or not, that is the subject matter of today's freedom of speech, which we are going to discuss with, and we have a very lit panelist with us, and in which I would like to invite my first panelist guest, and they all are legal luminary. Two of them are practicing advocates, and one is studying in law. So my first panelist guest is Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi. Advocate, just hold on. Some disturbance is coming. I think, okay, I will mute. Yeah. So our first panelist is Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi. Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi is practicing in Supreme Court, New Delhi, and various high courts of the country for over 20 years. He has been appearing in the courts for public causes besides commercial litigations across the country. He appeared in more than 50 public interest litigations, which includes health issues, education, environment, aviation issues, etc. He has also raised the issue of free testing of COVID-19 to all citizens in the private as well as government labs across the country as petitioner. He has also raised the issue of regulation of airfares by way of PIL in Delhi High Court. He has also raised the issue of Shaheen Bagh protest in Honorable Supreme Court on the ground the fundamental right of common citizens should not be violated, and several other issues which are in the public domain. His life is dedicated to millions of masses who are in need of the justice. Welcome, Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi on our show. Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, nowadays, two issues are very, very hot. One is about the freedom of speech, because Miss Kangana Raut has spoken something which many of the citizens feel it's offending, it should be under sedation, etc., etc. One Mr. Veerdas, the standing comedian, he also spoke something in USA, which many of the people feel that that is offending the nation or government, and it should also come under the sedation law. We would like to know, to discuss with you, whether the freedom of speech is against speaking something. If I have a freedom of speech, can I utter something against the government? It will be treated as anti-national and it will be tried under the sedation. Or if I will speak against the nation or those who matters, whether it's a national flag, whether those who have been the national prides, that comes under the sedation. So this thing is a very, very debatable, because people are very much misguided. They are not clear. It according to a few of them, they says that if we are speaking against the government of the day, whether it is in center or in a particular state, we should not be tried under the sedation. Otherwise, all the opposition, the person should be under the sedation and put for the life term the jail. But they also says that if we speak something anti-national about our national prides, then it should be tried under the sedation with a stricter punishments. We would like to know your views on freedom of speech. Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lal, for having me in such an important discussion. And I wish to thanks to my co-panelist, my friends. Mr. Lal, it is a very important topic. And first, I would like to say that in order to start discussion on the subject matter, the freedom of speech and expression, we need to understand what is the freedom of expression. The freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. It reinforces all other human rights, allowing the society to develop and progress. The ability to express our opinion and speak freely is essential to bring about change in the society. It is a foundation of every fundamental right which has been guaranteed in Part 3 of the Constitution of India. I must say that our Constitution is protecting this freedom of speech and expression, and it is equally available to every citizen of our country. Free speech has always been important throughout the history, because it has been used to fight for a change. Mahatma Gandhi and all the freedom fighters had used as an important weapon to change the logic of international community towards India. So it is undoubtedly an important right which I have been cherishing right from the time immemorial. The free speech is not only about your ability to speak, but the ability to listen to others also and allow others' views to be heard. We need to hear others' people's views as well as offering them your opinion. We are going through a time where the people do not want to be on a panel with the people they disagree with. But we should feel comfortable being in room with the people who disagree with us. Otherwise, nothing will change. My point, that fundamental this right is a fundamental because all other fundamental rights are originating from this fundamental right. Article 19(1)(a) is the most important right. It is a right on which majority of the legislation of our country are founded upon. Because unless the people will voice their opinion about a particular subject matter, probably the legislature will not really make a law. And law is a reflection of the society. And recently, the farmer law had been repealed because of that the protester had used the freedom of speech and expression as an important weapon to overturn the decision of the government. They have sat more than 1 year in a protest against the government legislation, and finally the government has fallen to the demands of the farmers. Whether it is right, wrong, that is another matter, but the fact of the matter is that the government has bowed down on the potent and most ferocious voice of the protest. So the protest is the foundation of democracy. And protest contains the important attribute of freedom of speech and expression. Because this is the weapon by which you can write another rights. In fact, our constitution has been written by resorting to this right rule. So it is the most important right, if it is not wrong. It is legitimate to say that this is the right on which our freedom fighters had taken the freedom from the Britishers. But I would like to say that this is the theoretical aspect, 19(1)(a). But this 91(a) has been the victim of violation. 91(a) has been the victim of the executive orders from the government, as in fact the government has been affected by a particular circumstances, because democracy is all about to fight for the election. So the government is not clean right from the very beginning, either BJP or a Congress. They have used this weapon in order to muzzle and stifle the voices of the common people. And that is what the agitation has taken place. That is what the brutal murder has taken place. And their examples are galore. There are so many examples. I must say, the freedom of speech, one of the most precious and important human rights. A free society depends on the free exchange of ideas. Nearly all ideas are capable of giving offense to somebody. Many of the most important, profound ideas in human history, such as those of Galileo, Charles Darwin, caused a great religious offense in their time. But the truth comes out, and truth has a bad habit of coming out. And the freedom of speech and expression are the natural voice of the natural people, biological person. Though it may be right or it may be wrong, but our democratic society must accept it, must digest it. Because once you have decided to lay a foundation of democracy, democracy is a foundation where all the divergent views converges together. It is not about digesting and not digesting the views which are against you. It is about digest the views which are critical about it. I am the most avowed proponent of the freedom of speech and expression. It is the most precious fundamental right. If I say it is not wrong. Now come to the Constitutional Court, which had interpreted the fundamental right from the very beginning. And I will take your attention back to 1973, where London, in a case, Company versus Union of India. In this judgment, the petitioner was a company, challenged the restriction imposed on the import policy of the newsprint. under Import Control Order 1955, under the News Order 1962, the newsprint policy of 1972 and 73 then placed further restriction under the feature. Establish the newspaper companies cannot start a new newspaper if they are already on two newspaper, one which is already in the newspaper. The maximum limit on the number of the pages in the newspaper was set to be 10 pages. Increase the number of pages shall not be more than 20%. So these are the challenge before the Honorable Supreme Court. And the Honorable Supreme Court has held that the petitioner case was maintainable and started, and even though the petitioner was a company, it cannot be taken as a bar to award a relief for the violation of rights of the sole shareholders of the staff. The court also said and claimed that freedom of speech and expression is important right and it cannot be taken away under any circumstances. And the newsprint policy was repealed. It was held to be violative of the Constitution of India. The court noted that the freedom of press is an essential element of Article 19(1)(a), and the absence of an express mention of such freedom in the special category was irrelevant. I would like to tell you that the Supreme Court was very categorical and candid in saying that even though the freedom of speech and expression has not been expressly written in the Constitution of India, it is irrelevant. What is relevant? That the crux of the constitutional mandate, that the government cannot exercise the executive orders to limit the freedom of expression. The court observed that fixing quotas on a newspaper can easily tackle the problem of shortage of newsprint, and that direct reference to with respect to page limit and other regulation were irrational. It cannot be limited, and it is not justified. The court held that the newsprint policy 1972-1973 was unconstitutional, and the case went in favor of the petitioner. This is the first case I have just mentioned, how our Supreme Court considered the freedom of speech and freedom of expression. This is the early judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court had touched each and every aspect and had held that it cannot be taken away. Similarly, there was another judgment, Hamdard Dawakhana versus Union of India, where the Honorable Supreme Court had once again held that on one hand, there is a fundamental right of individual to have a freedom of expression and speech, but it is not absolute. It must be curtailed as and when it requires in the sovereignty of the nation, in the favor of the public order. And therefore, in this Hamdard Dawakhana versus Union of India, the Honorable Supreme Court had said that prohibitive advertisement of drugs cannot come within the definition of 19(1)(a). So Supreme Court has balanced the right of freedom of expression and speech and the reasonable restriction on those rights in order to have a strong democracy. Because if the rights are not absolute, it cannot be enjoyed in a proper manner. So in this judgment, the Supreme Court had assessed the balance, that on one hand you have absolute freedom, you have absolute restriction also in a manner. I mean, it cannot be unfetteredly enjoyed at any point of time. It was not the mandate of the Constitution. It was not the intent of the Constitution. And the other judgment, Ramesh Thapar versus the State of Madras, also the Supreme Court had considered the aspect of the freedom of speech and expression guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India. In this case, the petitioner used to publish and circulate a newspaper named Crossroads. The newspaper name was a Crossroad, which he used to review and criticize the schemes and activities of the government of Madras. The government of Madras banned the entry and circulation of this newspaper in the state by restriction of the public safety ground. The Supreme Court in this case said that the right of circulation of the newspaper lies solely with the establishment. That is, the company of the newspaper and the state of Madras cannot interfere with the same ground of the public safety under Article 19(2). It's not reasonable restriction. And hence the ban on the entry and circulation of the newspaper of the state of Madras cannot be imposed under Article 19(2). So therefore, again, the Honorable Supreme Court had reiterated the balance of the right. The Supreme Court had on one hand highlighted the importance of the freedom of expression and speech, and at the same time, restriction is also important in the favor of the country. So this was the Ramesh Thaparan state. And fourth, Prabha Datta versus Union of India is also important, likewise important for the purpose of understanding the freedom of speech and expression. The petitioner, in this case, very simply and very briefly, I am telling you, the petitioner, Sri Prabha Datta, chief reporter of Hindustan Times, filed a petition under Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, asking for the writ, directing the respondent, the superintendent of Tihar Jail, to allow her to re-interview the two convicts, Ranga and Villa, who are charged with a death sentence for an offence under Section 302 of the Indian Penal Code. And the petition filed by them to the President of India for the communication of the sentence are reported to have been rejected by the President. Supreme Court, in this case, directed the superintendent of Tihar Jail to allow the representative of few newspaper to interview two death sentence and convicts under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India. Though it is not absolute right, nor indeed does it confer any right to the press to have unrestricted access to the means of information. But the Supreme Court reiterated the fundamental and the foundational aspect that the government cannot restrict a journalist to take an interview, because the people of this country wants to know exactly what is the feeling of that two convicts. So, the Honorable Supreme Court, there are thousands of judgments like this, and recent judgment like Sahin Bagh, in which I was a petitioner. The court had clearly held that the fundamental right is fine, but the fundamental right must not be enjoyed at the cost of the violation of the fundamental rights of the other. So therefore, in the Maneka Gandhi case versus Union of India, also the Supreme Court theoretically let down unsackable, unfettered explanation that freedom of speech and freedom of expression is inseparable, integral part of the Constitution of India, and it must not be defeated. It must not be allowed to be abused by those who are against the country. So there was a proponents and there was opponents of this fundamental right, but the fact of the matter is that it is a very healthy aspect of democracy. So on one hand, what is the fundamental right? The second is the standpoint of the courts, and third is the most important, the practical aspect of the fundamental right of the freedom of expression. Mr. Lal, I have no hesitation in saying that even the Supreme Court of India, which is the guardian, which are the watchdog of the Constitution of India, had witnessed the violation of this particular right, and every time through its judgment has upheld that the freedom of speech and expression is the vital provision to the constitutional wealth of the country. But unfortunately, Supreme Court can pass only order. It is the executive who has to implement it, who has to impose it. But there is a diametrical distance between the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect. When the constitutional court is saying the executive to follow the constitution, the executive is all the time violating and infringing the rights of the common people, and including the freedom of speech and expression. And we have seen number of things. So therefore, the theoretical and practical aspect, we have a long distance to cover. Still there is a distance. We must say that each and every day the freedom of speech and expression are being routinely breached, and the enforcement is still a long dream. There is no dream. There is realistically, the people are subjected to all kind of torture for even saying something against the government. When our constitution is saying that it is a freedom, it is a reasonable freedom, it is not absolute freedom, but who is to decide? It is for the judiciary to decide. It is not the executive. And the executive, by forming an opinion, putting a person behind a bar, and person has to approach High Court and Supreme Court. And there are several cases where a senior journalist, I forgot his name, has approached to Supreme Court. There was a case registered in Himachal Pradesh. It is absolutely not acceptable in a democratic country like India. So my point of view is that there is unequivocal acceptance that the fundamental right, freedom of speech and expression is a fundamental right. So why there has been a consistent violation? Why the Constitutional Court are not taking immediate action against those who are responsible for prohibiting the accessibility of the most important right of the freedom of speech and expression? Why judgment after judgment which are being passed are highlighting the importance of the freedom of expression? It has not been implemented and is not being implemented. I think the time has come when this fundamental right should be declared, that in case a person or even the government infringes, he should be put a penalty of extraordinary dimension. There must be a deterrence, because these governments are not having deterrence. They are not caring about the importance of this right, and they are not feared of any kind of consequences that will follow, even if they will infringe the right of the common people, because the right of the important people are irrelevant for the mighty government, because the government is a mighty. It is the master. So my point is that there are several laws which are imposing restriction on the fundamental right. No doubt it is, as I said earlier, also there must be balance, and balance must be made. But the fact of the matter is that Supreme Court and all other courts had said that the fundamental rights under Article 19(1) of the Constitution is not sacrosanct. I mean, it is subject to the limitation and restriction, I agree. But between these two lines, restriction and reasonable restriction, an individual must be allowed to exercise the fundamental right, because that is how our democracy is made. And with this, I would like to conclude that it is nowadays where, speaking against the government, there are instances people have been put behind bar. This should not be done, because it is the violation of the Constitution. It is the infringement of the rights of the common people. The government should broaden their ambit of the criticism, broaden the ambit of acceptability. We must accept it, because there is disagreement is the foundation of democracy. We disagree. Democracy can be run only by divergences, right? And democracy must be run on the basis of the acceptance of ideas from a cross section of the society. Democracy cannot be run that I am right always. So therefore, it is a very important right. There are thousands of judgments which have been written by the Supreme Court and High Court also, highlighting the importance and fundamentality and foundationality of this particular right. So therefore, it must not be violated, infringed under any circumstances. And that is what I would like to say to you on this particular issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, for giving your views. And Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi has given three aspects of this freedom of speech. First, he described what is freedom of speech. Then he has given the cases, and he quotes about the cases about the newspaper quota case, where the government restricted the newspapers. They wanted to muzzle the voice of the newspaper, and I still remember that case. And it has been reported very heavily, because at that time Mrs. Gandhi was the prime minister, and they wanted to muzzle the voice of the newspapers, but they won the case. Then he mentioned about the Hamdard Dawakhana case, which was that you cannot advertise something which is illegal, because those medicines are not been approved, which they wanted to advertise. In that, the Supreme Court has taken a right view that no, freedom of speech or expression doesn't mean that you will do something which is illegal. And then he mentioned about the Ramesh Thapar crossroad case, which was again the government has given, the Supreme Court has given a strict order against the government of Madras to not to restrict the circulation of the crossroad paper. Then he also mentioned about the Prabhadatta, Ranga and Billa case that was also highlighted at that time too much, and they succeeded in getting the interview by the intervention of the Honorable Supreme Court. Then he also mentioned about his own case, which he has filed about against the Steinbach, and in that case also the Supreme Court says that you are having a freedom of speech, but it doesn't mean that it will infringe the freedom of speech or expression of others, not on the cost of others. And he also mentioned about the case of Menka Gandhi. But and we have seen about the Vinod Dua case, where the Supreme Court has quashed the sedition charges against Vinod Dua. Even in the recently about against the Rajdeep Sir Desai and many journalists, Supreme Court has taken a very, very strong views. But one point which he has mentioned, which I'm going to come to him the next round, which he mentioned about that instead of putting somebody jail, which I understood, which he will be clarifying, instead of putting somebody in jail, it should be a monetary fine. Do you mean to this, Advocate Shashank Deo, that in sedition case, if suppose somebody has uttered something against the nation, or which is really fit for the sedition, instead of putting him in jail, put some monetary fine on him or her and give a warning? Or do you mean to say like this, or you want to say something else?
No, what I am trying to say exactly the same thing, because our judicial system is a reformative judicial system. It is not a system of sentencing system. So therefore, because law is to reform the society, right? It is to regulate the society. It is to bridge the gap between the law and the society. It is not about, punishing and sentencing an individual. Otherwise, whom you sentence one day, every people will be behind the jail. So the purpose is like this. Our law is a reformatory law. It is not a revengeful law. So we have to follow the jurisprudence. So that is what I am trying to say to the government.
Okay. Thank you very much, Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi. We will discuss this in the next round. Now, I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and she is Advocate Avishi Dhaka. Advocate Avishi Dhaka is BA LLB Honors LLM. She is advocate in Supreme Court, New Delhi. She is a result-oriented professional with excellence in implementing training mechanism to deliver desired output, seeking assignments in learning and development with an organizations of high repute. Her areas of expertise are ability to balance priorities and coordinate work effectively, leadership skills, excellent analytical skills, and aptitude for figures, ability to stay calm under pressure, can analyze large amounts of information, good spoken communication skills, client care skills, sound judgment, organized and efficient good projects, management and team building skills. She was trained at Gurgaon Cyber Crime Cell under Commissioner of Gurgaon Police and Mr. Rakshit Tandon, cyber security expert, and dealt with police investigations in cyber crime cases, e-commerce crimes, social media crimes, website crimes, mobile crimes, email crimes, etc. Welcome, Advocate Avishi Dhaka on our show. Advocate Avishi Dhaka, you have heard what Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi has spoken, and he is in no terms, rather I will say very, very clear terms, he mentioned that the sedition case or taking the help of this freedom of speech or sedation. He is very clear. He says government should not act against anyone who is speaking against the government, and not put the sedition case. Even if they have to put, it should be monetary, not the jail terms. As well as he has given all the details about all those. Now you have worked in the crime, the cyber crime, and now you know that what is the condition of the e-com or the social media, etc. And we are seeing what's happening today, that people are expressing their views on social media, and there are sedation cases filed against them, whether it is Miss Kangna Ranaut or Mr. Veer Das. They are being subjected to for the because they are saying something about the about on the social media, or in a platform or on a media. We would like to know from you your views on freedom of speech. Just I will request you, if you can just tilt the your laptop or mobile screen down, so that it will be shown better. Downside, if more, is it possible? Mm, okay, leave it. Yes, please go
This
ahead,
much is the
advocate.
maximum.
Yeah, okay, advocate Avishi Dhaka, please.
Good morning, panelists. Thank you for calling me here for this freedom of speech. Thank you, Mr. Lal Goel. And a lot has been already said about freedom of speech. I will not state the proper law over here. It has already been discussed. So it is a fundamental right given to us by the Constitution of India, which is subjected to a few restrictions, reasonable restrictions, which is not an absolute right after the amendments. But the law has its own black gray area. And for that, we have multiple examples how, after having the right, people use and misuse, and how the government is using the freedom of right, freedom of speech and expression. We have democracy in our country. So, be it Kangna Ranaut, be it Veer Das, they can, being the citizen of India, they can speak about the condition of our nation and about the government, how it handles those situations, how they have been living. It is that they are now connected on the public platform. We cannot say that they are always doing it for their PR. We have many examples to see where people have taken it for their PR. That is like people like Swara Bhaskar. They speak the language which is not so common, and neither is it the voice of the masses, which is maximum times as if she is the victim of the government, and especially the ruling government, which is very much into publicizing and politicizing the Hindu religion. So there we have Kanhaiya Kumar. Kanhaiya Kumar is mostly speaks on the political things. So he also speaks on freedom of speech. But how he came into light by using freedom of speech and expression was patronizing and protesting for a terrorist, and naming him and crowning him to be a freedom fighter and supporting him, and saying things like Bharat tere tukde honge. And now you talk all sense, now you get promoted, and now you use it for your own fame. So now you talk about freedom of speech and how people should be using it, and how more freedom of speech should be given to you. So from the history, we have seen cartoonist R.K. Narayan. He was famous for freedom of speech, but how sanely and how in a satire way he used freedom of speech in the national newspaper. And still we have examples to see freedom of speech being used in many cartoons, where we not just objectify our present condition of the government and a tussle of the parties, and we also objectify their physical features, how they look. We make their noses big, or we show them the kind of folk dresses they wear. So uh, we have many things for the freedom of speech, and many times the politicians and public speakers have come into the danger of speaking something which the government would not like, and which would surge the debate on freedom of speech. Like once a girl was arrested by the Mamta Banerjee government for slamming her government, which was just a post on Facebook. So she was booked, although she was booked for sedition and Section 66 of cyber law, but the case actually belongs to the freedom of speech. This was not a big deal. Then Shiv Sena again did the same thing, arrested two girls, one for posting something which was against their government, mocking the government, and one for liking her comment, commenting and liking it. So are these so here we talk about the black gray area of the law. So all these people had not violated the law. They had just made their own what we say, that they were just making it public. They were just sharing it among their friends. It was not even public. They were not sharing it into Twitter. Many times we see government officials posting on Twitter on their proper government ministry they work for, their senior officials and their departmental things, which are the harsh reality of the working conditions. So they are complete, they are taken into the custody, they are suspended, they are not heard about for a long time, and this is how it works. So should the government do something, it should be tolerant. And many times we see the opposition parties talking about the issues which are mainly about tolerance. And like we also talked about Rajdeep Sardesai having lawsuits all against and for in the same law, that was sedition and freedom of speech. So here we also talk about actresses like Poonam Pandey and Rakhi Sawant flashing Pakistani flags on their chest to show support to Pakistan during India and Pakistan cricket match. So does that amount to sedition? Does that amount to freedom of speech violation? And their fundamental rights should be curtailed, and they should not be given any other chance, and they shall be penalized for it. So here, all these things, we also see that once it all started when the main surge was started in 2007, where a cartoonist from Kanpur was arrested for making a cartoon mocking the government and their policies and the way they work. So all these things, they all talk about um, the freedom of speech and expression and how they are taken by the government. So it all is about the government. When the people in the government they speak, they are allowed to speak, they are allowed to be published in the newspaper, they are given proper PR, and the people who can make a difference against them, they are usually not so liked, and then their rights are not absolute. They are to be restricted. They might not be given the same rights as them. So this is what we talk about. So here I should talk about the penalization already, which is stated. And what is stated in the law is already with what is practiced, and people are not afraid of. So I think the penalization should be more stricter, more into the CRPC. Apart from the compensation should also be made heavy. Their assets should also be attached to the government treasury, and not just that, their foreign assets should also be taken so that they learn a proper lesson. And apart from that, they should be given more severe penalization, like solitary confinement, so that they should understand. Because until and unless we do not give them a proper standard of penalization, you know, the law enforcement will not be enforced properly. So it should be for the government ruling party as well as the people who are creating ruckus in the name of freedom of speech should learn a lesson. So I rest my case here.
Okay, thank you very much, Advocate Avishi Dhaka, for giving your views. Although you have been very selective, you have given the views from one side. You have mentioned about Sir Bhaskar, Kanhaiya Kumar. Although till date it is not established that who has uttered those words about Tukde Tukde, and the court, your Delhi court only has given him the bail, as well as till date the government could not prove, the CBI could not prove that it was Kanhaiya Kumar or somebody whom he is very closely associated, or it was doctored by some of the media channels, which is a matter of investigation. You mentioned about R.K. Lakshman. At that time, R.K. Lakshman, when he was doing all this cartooning work, that was the government, not of this present government. They were quite tolerant. If you see those cartoons, I am sure that at that time you might be quite young. You have not seen, but we used to see. We used to laugh that how a cartoonist can dare to make cartoons on the towering personalities like Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru or Indira Gandhi, etc. But never he was gone under the sedition cases. And you have mentioned about one girl by Mamta Banerjee, but selectively you have forgotten the girl from Bangalore who was arrested, who was brought to Delhi by Delhi police and tortured, and ultimately Delhi High Court, how that not, I think that's lower court only, how they have the on the judgment against the government. You have not highlighted that. I always believe that our panelists should be, but yes, it is again a freedom of speech. You have a freedom of speech to say one side. You mentioned the Shiv Sena. Yes, Shiv Sena has also picked up, but at that time BJP was also the co-partner, in that crime, and they have not criticized. Now they are talking because Shiv Sena is not with them. And you have mentioned about Rakhi Sawant and others. Okay, and you mentioned about the Pakistani flags, etc. This is a gray area where I do not want to venture. But recently, the UP government has come out with a dictate that if anybody will say Pakistan about the Pakistani victory, celebrate Pakistani victory, they will be put under the jail, etc. Although earlier used to be, there was no such type of dictate, but it is now there. I was just wondering when the match was going on between Pakistan and New Zealand or others, and for Indians, whether it is New Zealand or Pakistan, what difference it makes? Rather, when you travel abroad, people consider Asians as one. And there we used to be very friendly with all Asians countries persons, because we are known as Asians, not as a European there. And at that time we never mind to be very friendly with our those people, because we know that our honorable Prime Minister, when he can go there uninvited, had a biryani or a vegetable biryani definitely, and touching the feet of the mother of their Prime Minister. If he has the liberty, why a person, a common citizen, cannot have the liberty to say something about Pakistan? Or it is only the immunity given to the honorable Prime Minister, not to a citizen? That also a matter of debate which we have to do. And what Advocate says, contrary to what Advocate Shashank has mentioned, she says that strict punishment to be given, their assets to be attached, etc., etc. Who is going to decide that? The government. And we know how the government is doing today. Kangna Raut is violating, is hurting the sentiments of many. At least I know that we know that how much sentiments of ours have been hurt when she says that we have not got, we got on a begging thing. Is it allowed? It's an insult to everyone. One side we say we can't insult our national flag, we can't insult the national those chins, just Ashoka thing. And we also said those who are pride of father, Mahatma Gandhi is father of nation. Is we allowed? We can abuse father of nation, but we cannot utter a single word about our present Prime Minister or present Chief Minister of UP. Is it correct, Advocate Avishi, according to you? If it is correct, then I think what the opposition party should do, they should en masse say that till the time these are there, we will not go to the jail. Everyone should go to the jail. Our opposition parties are also very weak in this way, because they should come and stand and say this is wrong. And what Advocate Shashank mentioned, one thing very, very clearly, I must appreciate him. He says if the freedom of speech would have not been there, we would not get the Azadi, the freedom, although it was in Bhik, according to your Kangna Raut, and we are beggars because we are born after the independence, but our parents were born there, and she has not insulted anybody. She has insulted mine, and I'm sure your parents also. They all are beggars because they were fighting for the independence, and all those our Senani, or those Jawans, the soldiers who are fighting, or the army persons, or the police people who are fighting before 2014, they were all beggars. Can we tolerate this? Is it a freedom of speech or not? That we will discuss in the next way. Thank you very much, Advocate Avishi, for giving your views. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Mr. Nishan N. Mr. Nishan N is the president of Rotary Club Mangalore. He is a BA, BCom, and he is pursuing his LLB, diploma in e-business management, again pursuing. He is an international service director of Rotary Club from 2020 to 2021. He is district membership and club developer, RID 3181, Mysore, Chamraj Nagar, and Dakshin Kannada and Madikeri 2021. And he is the district conference co-chairman, RID 3181, Mysore, Chamraj Nagar, Dakshin Kannada and Madikeri 2122. Welcome, Mr. Nishan N. Mr. Nishan N, you are president of Rotary Club, but mainly because you are pursuing LLB. And you might have read about the fundamental rights in the very first year. And you might have also read the 91A. We would like to know from you, and you have heard what both your seniors, Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, as well as Advocate Avishi Dhaka has mentioned. And they have their views, which is required because we have a freedom of speech. Now, we would like to know your views on freedom of speech. Mr. Nishan N, please.
Firstly, I would like to thank Lal Goel sir for inviting me for this discussion, along with the other two dignitaries, Dr. Shashank sir and Avish ma'am. All citizens have right to freedom of speech and expression under Article 9, Subclause 1 of Indian Constitution. It is not freedom of speech. That means we can't speak whatever comes to, like some of them are speaking, some of the celebrities are speaking whatever mind, which has not, like we don't have that much right. Even though we have freedom of speech, it's our duty to filter whatever comes to our mind before speaking it. Freedom of speech and expression means the right to express conviction or opinions freely by word of mouth or writing or printing or picture or any other mode. It includes the expression of one's idea through any communicable medium. It might be visible representation such as gestures or sign also. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are some of the reasonable restrictions. They are like in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, in the interest of security of state, in the interest of friendly relation with foreign state, the of public order, in the interest of decency and morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement of an offense. So, what are these restrictions? I will explain it with instances. Use of mechanical instruments like loudspeaker and amplifier is not guaranteed under freedom of speech because any municipality or corporation form bylaws pertaining to it. It's not violation under Article 9, Subclause 1A. On this point, even the Gujarat High Court says that there is a fundamental right to freedom of speech, and the right extends to mechanical devices also, but such devices are likely to cause disturbance, nuisance. The reasonable could be placed on use of such devices. And for the requirement of a permit would be reasonable restriction. So in simple, permit is the reasonable restriction for use of speaker or loudspeaker or amplifier in public places. So in several other cases have been held that citizen also has right not to hear and not to be by loud noises. As I stated earlier, the state may reasonable restriction to exercise the right of freedom of speech and expression in the interest of security of sanity, integrity of India, friendly relation, and so on. So, two conditions have to be satisfied for restriction is to be held under constitutional, because it must be a reasonable, and as I said earlier, to decide however it is whether it is reasonable or not. The court can only decide reasonable restriction, but cannot decide whether the legislation itself is reasonable. So what they have to see is whether restriction is reasonable, not legislation itself is reasonable. To do this, several considerations like in history of legislation, duration of extent of the restriction are taken into account. Again, what was reasonable 10 years ago not be so even today. There is no foolproof test for to reasonableness or otherwise of a restriction, which may be applied in to every case coming for the, because each case differs on basis of fact and other stuff. So secondary, such restriction must relate to one of nine heads, as I mentioned earlier. It is some said expression reasonable restriction has indirectly introduced due process clause of American Constitution into Indian Constitution, but it is not correct view. The power of Supreme Court of US is really, very wide because of due process clause, which is not Indian court. Uh, we can consider the reasonableness of the restriction, but not reasonableness of the legislation itself, which is possible in US. And the due process of the Supreme Court of India has only repeatedly held of due process does not apply to Indian Constitution. So even freedom of speech includes freedom of press, as sir mentioned in the beginning. Although Article 91 does not specifically refer to freedom of press, the courts have from the held the freedom of speech and expression includes freedom of press as a circular. I would like to give my opinion regarding freedom of speech pertaining to celebrities. They should stop entering or giving unnecessary statements, especially actors. See, people consider even acting as just an occupation or profession, just like any other. Like for example, teachers. She does a teacher or she just they teach and go home. Doctors they treat patient and they go home. They work and go home. They won't interfere in unnecessary. They just do their work and live their life peacefully by earning their livelihood. But uh, see, actually, the mistake us because we give so much importance to celebrities who don't even take of responsibility before speaking or giving any statement which would affect public at large. For example, as Sir mentioned, Khan and Veer Das, one is mocking India in a foreign land, uh, and one more she gives some random statements, no matter what it makes sense or not. Because I never knew who was Veer Das, to be frank, till this controversial monologue came to my notice. So what Veer Das did was wrong because every house or family will be having their own problem or drawback or fault. Some family will be having financial problem or other may have some other. But we never go and complain in our neighbor's house because complaining in neighbor's house, we won't solve the problem in our neighbor's place because complaining to your neighbors, so it just creates entertainment and enjoyment for them. It won't benefit for us. It won't solve that problem. It's better we just solve among ourselves by discussing it among our family members. Usually, whenever anything happens in our family, we discuss it here itself. We don't go to a neighbor. Same thing. We can take example of Vedas. He discussed it here instead of going into foreign land and just for the sake of getting attention. He has done it. Uh, my opinion. So same way being Indian, I'm not saying India is perfect. As I told earlier, in my instances of family neighbor, we consider India as a family and John Center, Washington DC as a neighbor's place. What is not telling our problem in a neighbor place? So in this only the Veer has gained some followers, fame, and some people also started to make fun of Veer himself. And also it's same even with Kang, he gives some random statement and people make fun of. So I'm not generalizing actors or celebrities for that matter, because well-mannered actors who only do their work and also give back to their good deeds. I would like to recall one name, that is none other than late Punit Rajkumar sir. As we know, he is only known for his good work and acting skills rather than his statements. Why I mentioned was, uh, as we know, Sir Lal Goel, chairman of Organ Donation India Foundation, and even Sir Punit sir has donated his eyes, by which motivated of his fans and followers to donate their eyes after his death. As per my knowledge, if I'm not wrong, every day 500 to 1,000 people are registering for eye donation. According to me, he is real celebrity. When he was alive, he used his freedom of speech in positive way and motivated many people even after his death by his good deeds. So we have to take such actor and celebrities, comedian as role model, like this Veer Das and many others, for helping others to know. And he also has made social awareness regarding eye donation. To conclude, freedom of speech is given for everyone, but it only matters how well we use it. So if Lal Goel sir is using it in positive as platform for young minds to discuss about. So I can tell we have to use freedom of speech like motivating others for organ donation without expecting any for his efforts, any expecting. And also, so best example for using freedom of speech, we can take example of this program itself, media conference with Google. Here we are discussing with other dignitaries in a respectful manner, so it won't create any problem. So I would like to thank Lal Goel sir, Advocate Shashank sir, as well as Avish for giving me this opportunity, and thank you and all who are present here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nishan. And Mr. Nishan, you have made 2-3 points. One point which you have made about the Mr. Veer Das, and you rightly said we were not knowing who is he, and we came to know about after this his standing thing has come, the comedy come. But you have made one point that he is why he has gone abroad and there he has spoken that we cannot speak. But you have to understand, nowadays it's a matter of we are in the uh, time. It's a social media. Even if you are not going abroad, if you are sitting at your home, if you are just tweeting or putting something on WhatsApp or YouTube, it will go around the world, not only one particular city or one Kennedy Hall only of 10,000 audience. You can be addressing crores and crores of audience. And this plea that if you are going abroad and saying something, I will just remind you that our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has gone to Europe, and he has mentioned that those who born before 2014, they were saying why we are born in this country. This was not a fit case for the sedition. I don't know. You all are the legal people. You should know. So it is not the new first thing that somebody has done in a foreign land. Our Prime Minister has also said something. So it is a very common thing. But yes, your views about the late actor Mr. Punit Rajkumar, yes, one that is really a good thing that he has done, and got the 4 people have got the eyesight. But the thing is, whether we are giving importance to the those people who wants to create unnecessary, as one of the panelists said, the PR exercise they are doing, or we have to give the importance to those who are really doing work for nation building. But here, the freedom of speech means I am free, I can abuse anybody, and the other person is not free. But if he will abuse somebody, they are then they cry that no, you are not. Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate your views, and we feel that if the young generation will understand the difference between a defamatory and those who wants to do something against the country or hurt the sentiments of the public at large, they should be punished. But how the punishment has to be done, who is going to decide, that we will ask in the next round. Thank you very much, Mr. Nishan. Now my question goes to Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi. Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, Miss Kangna Raut has not stopped about her bheek comment that we got the bheek that freedom on in the bheek beggars plate in 1947, but we got in 2014 when Mr. Modi came on the power. Next time she said that Mahatma Gandhi is not a freedom fighter. He has not saved Bhagat Singh. He was against Subhash Chandra Bose, and his non-violent thing was wrong. Giving his cheek, that if somebody is slapping you one cheek, offer the next cheek, is wrong according to Kangana Rao, not not according to me. So she is basically criticizing the non-violent thing. It means the entire Jain community has been put in a dog, because Jain community always been in non-violence. Even they are some such type of followers, as well as now after this U-turn of Mr. Modi day before yesterday, what she said, she says that we are now in a jihadi state and we should be under the dictatorship. But unfortunately, we have become so mum, not a single word been uttered. Yes, few of them, like Varun Gandhi from BJP, Mr. Advani also spoke, but not a single minister have courage to say something that is it a jihadi state? It is not sedition? Or she says, this democracy is useless, we must bring the dictatorship. So now one complaint has been filed by Youth Wing Congress. I would like to know from you, do you agree that such type of complaint should be filed, or no complaint should be filed and we must see it's a freedom of speech, and according to you we must fine her because she's minting money from the so many doing acting in a very big thing, so she will won't mind to pay 100 crores. So we will put the exemplary fine, like we have the Supreme Court has put on Sahara at one time. So exemplary 100 crores she will pay and she will utter. What you say about this? Or you have to agree what Advocate Avishi says, that she should be given a confined and some mental asylum, and she should be punished so drastically that nobody will utter against our father of nation, against the present government, that they are jihadis. What you say about this?
Mr. Lal, first of all, I must say that I was hearing very meticulously and attentively to both young mind, and there was a very polarized, opinion over this aspect. But definitely, this is the beauty of our culture, our society, our democracy. And I have a respect for every one of them. But I must say to you that our Shastra had said Vidya Dadati Vinayam, because which means that education will make you humble. And you cannot be, quite adamant, resolute on every subject. We must have a courtesy to understand discourteous remark, to accept discourteous remark. And before coming to Kangana Rao and Mr. Modi, I would like to tell you one thing, that Gandhi ji has said, the hate, the sin, not the sinner. It should be the guide in the administration of criminal justice. So what I'm trying to say, that our justice system, as I have said, is reformative and rehabilitative. This is the fundamental philosophy of our criminal justice system. And one more thing which I would like to tell you, in the words of Krishna Iyer, that Justice Krishna Iyer is the most celebrated justice of Indian history. He had said in a very clear term that the criminal must be respected. They might have committed a crime, but the crime must be punished, not the criminal be punished. So the statement of Krishna Iyer is very unequivocal and very, very, very clear. That the Justice Iyer had further said that the spirit of correctional philosophy or in a criminology, that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And never write of a man wearing the criminal attire, but remove the dangerous degeneracy in him and restore his retarded human potential by holistic healing of his favored fatigue and frustrated inside by repairing the repressive, though hidden injustice of social order, which is the vicariously guilty of the criminal behavior of the many innocent convicts. Law must rise with the life, the Justice Iyer had said, and jurisprudence and law must respond to humanism. So this is what the Justice Iyer had said, Gandhiji had said. And let me tell you very frankly, coming to Kangana Ranaut, actually, I am not really aware of Kangana Ranaut much, except that she is a film actress. And every time she speaks, he speaks venom. She speaks the poison. And she is enjoying the consequences of poison. She is enjoying the consequences of venom. Her growth is based upon poisonous criticism against against individual, against a system, and she knows where to hit, and consequently she is enjoying everything. I must tell to you, Kangana Ranaut education I am not aware of, but she must understand the history. She must understand our Shastras. She must understand our Vedas. She must understand our philosophy, because she must understand also the criminal justice system of the country. Gandhi cannot be separated from our philosophy, from our history. Gandhi is the foundation. And what Gandhi had brought, I personally believe nobody can bring. Entire world is celebrating the principle of Gandhi. How can one say that a nation, this country has become independent in 2014? I have a respect for Prime Minister Modi. I have my personal respect, right? He has brought about changes, no doubt about it. But at the same time, everything has a pluses and minuses. Even Gandhi is not without it, because you are human, you are prone to commit error, right? So my point is, Kangana Ranaut is a personality of divergence, a personality of division, and that is what she had done so far.
Okay.
What she had done, I don't know.
No, but
So what
my question to you, Advocate Shashank Dev, is whether the sedition case is to be filed against her or not.
Again, I'm telling you, Mr. Lal, that sedition cases and all sorts of cases which had been prescribed in a law, which are made in colonial era or made after the independence, are just a exercise in futile. Because I'm just telling to you how many people have been punished. There is no one. Because one government is filing a case, another government lifts it out. So the purpose is futile.
Okay.
Purpose is completely futile. Tell me. See, actually, I met VP Singh in 96 or 97. I forgot. And he said, कि अब मैं छपता हूं, जीता नहीं हूं. अब मैं छपता हूं, I am being published, I am not leaving. I am leaving because I am being published. तो ये जितने भी लोग हैं, ये जो आज हमारे जो कंगना रनौत जैसे आदमी हैं और भी उस तरह के जो नेता वर्ग है, what they are doing to make it relevant. You know, they are making relevant because they are preaching, you know, the venom of selfishness, and because they cannot live without that. I'm come to the Prime Minister Modi. I jihadist. I have not heard the statement made by the Prime Minister. Of course, we cannot dispute the fact that
no. It's not made by Prime Minister. It is the statement made by Kangana Ranaut only. After the Prime Minister has withdrawn those 3 farm laws, she says that we are living in a jihad state now. We require a dictatorship, and she praised Indira Gandhi that how she has made the Khalistan is correct. We require that. So now why she has given the statement, it shows she is a bipolar. which is a medical term. You might be knowing a mental disorder, where sometimes she's praising the Mr. Narendra Modi, and sometimes now she says it's a jihadi. Anyway, you have made a point that no case should be filed, but she should learn one thing, that she is hurting the sentiments of many, which is not good. If anybody will say something about her personally, she will feel bad. Thank you very much, Advocate Shashank Deo. Now my question goes to Advocate Avishi. Advocate Avishi, are you there? I think Advocate Avishi has left. She doesn't want my question, which was meant for her only. Anyway, leave it. I will come to Advocate, not Advocate, Rotrek Nishan, future advocate. You have mentioned about Veer Das. Now, Veer Das is, you say that he has spoken something in USA, and this is not acceptable. Again, I am asking you, when we are putting anything you are putting on Twitter or any of the social media, it goes everywhere in the world. So what difference it makes whether it is done here or there? Or you think the Veer Das has done wrong, he should be tried under sedation? What are your views about this?
What I meant was, like, he got an opportunity to represent India in that particular place. He could have
No,
represented
sorry, Mr. Nishan, he's not representing India. He has gone, it's his business to earn money, and that's why he has gone there. So he's not representing India at all. We are not such a person that any XYZ can go and say something about us. No, we have not authorized him to represent us. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, but still, he is Indian, considered as Indian. When an Indian goes to foreign land, he's considered as Indian. When we are more responsible because our country, not in formal manner, but informal manner. Like, for example,
then Mr. Nishan, what you said, what Prime Minister Modi has said something in Europe, you might have heard that speech also. That people were saying that we are very unfortunate that we are born in India before 2040. We were in India, we were not. You can hear that. So, but my question is whether we should file a sedation case against him or not, Veer Das.
As told, sedition is of colonial era. Like, actually, it is useful in some times, and it is actually sedition. But nowadays, sedition has become we can hear that word so frequently that for each and everything they are filing that complaint.
Okay.
So I can't differentiate whether it has to be used or not.
Okay, thank you very much. Now my last question goes to Mr. Shashank, Advocate Shashank Deo Sudhi. Advocate Shashank Deo Sudhi. There are two things which I want to know from you. One is, because now she has left, Advocate Avishi, because this was, I wanted to ask her critically. Yesterday I heard that Aligarh Hindu Sabha President and Secretary, they criticized our Prime Minister in a very, very derogatory way. They removed his photograph from the office and used very derogatory words, which I would not like to use those words on our media conference. Do you think they should be tried under the sedation or not? Although they are from Hindu Mahasabha of Aligarh. I am giving you the exact this thing also. The same lady who celebrated Nathuram Godse, who just with a sword cut the photograph of Mahatma Gandhi on the Nathuram Godse, this thing on 30th of January. She was the same lady. Now she has used very derogatory words against Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi yesterday. What should be, what law should do?
See, Mr. Lal, law and punishment must have a deterrence. But unfortunately, I have not come across any person who had been punished for sedition. So far as I know, whatever limited knowledge I have, and even if really some punishment had been given, it might have been given long ago. In the recent time, I personally feel that no punishment, at least a kind of deterrent punishment, has been given to any person who had used
so according to you, we should not do anything like that. Now one more thing I would like to know. Do you think that we must have a committee instead of government to act against for this type of sedition case, where either a retired judge or a sitting judge, a committee of the judicial persons, they should decide whether this is a fit case for sedition or not the police. What do you say about this?
My only view on this issue, that not only in this case, like sedition case, every case in every police station there must be a retired justice, right? And retired judges, in fact, not justice, retired judges, like magistrate who might have retired from the magistracy, they must really sit over there to guide the police that in what cases the FIR should be registered, in what cases the FIR should not be registered. Because we have a long pool of retired judges from the lower court who can contribute tremendously to the strengthening the police system in our country, because the police, how they act. You go to police station, they will not register.
I got the answer of yours. So thank you very much, Advocate Shashank Deo. So viewers, you have seen that freedom of speech is something which is inherent, which is there. But freedom of speech doesn't mean that I am free and I will speak anything whatsoever which is hurting the sentiments of my neighbor, my countryman, or for anyone. We should not do something, even we should not utter anything for the country, other countries also. That is also mentioned in the draft of in the law, legislation. So we have to be very, very careful when we are speaking. We must put the facts. Don't try to do something which you don't know, whether it's Kangna Raut or Veer Das. They must be very cautious while uttering anything. After all, they are hurting sentiments of many, many people. Be positive, as our young panelist, Mr. Nishan, says. Be positive, do something which is very positive. You become the news, but don't try to create the fake news or the news which hurts others. Thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, Newsgaon se Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, Karu News, as well as shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor to bring to you everyday new topic. And tomorrow, our topic is U-turn. Yes, you heard correctly, U-turn. You know that how these 3 farm laws has been taken back by our honorable Prime Minister. And our panelists are Kuwar Naren Singh. He is the National Chief Patron of Akhil Bharatiya Kshatriya Mahasabha. He is the Vice President of Rashtriya Lok Dal UP. Mr. Pradeep Mathur is the former leader of Congress Legislative Party in UP Assembly at Lucknow. Mr. Parmanand Pandey he's a farmer as well as a journalist, and he's the founder President of Utho Jago Foundation, Delhi and Nagpur. And Mr. Arun Lakshman is the Director of Center for Policy and Development Studies. He was the officer on special duty to Minister of State for Law and Justice, Government of India at the time of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So we will be discussing about U-turn tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi. Thank you very much, Rotrek Nishan, and thank you very much, Advocate Avishi in absentia. And thank you all the viewers. I am sure today the program is quite thought-provoking. Please speak. Whatsoever you want to speak, it should be positive. Why we are talking negative? We have so much to do positive, and we